My name is Sylvie Mercer. I'm 33 years old, and I'm used to silence. But this time it wasn't mine. Shut your mouth. My mother doesn't whisper it. She doesn't even say it quietly. She screams it straight across the ballroom, her voice sharp as glass, right as the governor finishes his speech. People turn. Some wince. Others look straight at me. I don't speak. I don't flinch. I don't even blink. We're at the Virginia State Civic Commendation Ceremony chandeliers, white linen, half-eaten creme brulee, and polished name tags. My younger sister Lena just received a state award for civil-military cooperation. My mother is beaming. Until I opened my mouth. I only said, "Actually, I think there's a misspelling on the certificate. That's all." My voice was low, calm, not even critical, just an instinctive correction. The kind you give when your eyes are trained to spot details others miss. But my mother doesn't like corrections, especially not from me. Especially not when we're surrounded by people she desperately wants to impress. And now everyone is watching. I lower my hands, let the room settle around the tension. She's standing one heel half off the marble tile wine glass, trembling slightly in her grip. She's never hit me in public. But this is the kind of slap she saves for her words. Lena stares down at the certificate in her hands like it's suddenly radioactive. The governor awkwardly adjusts his lapel mic, and from behind the curtain of camera flashes and protocol aides, someone shifts. Across the room, in the fourth row behind the podium, a man in full-dress uniform stands. He doesn't say anything. Not yet. But I feel it. My mother doesn't. She's still seething, still rehearsing the next line she'll hurl when we're in the car. The man is maybe in his late 50s, silver hair, dark blue shoulder boards. From the corner of my eye, I catch the glint of a NATO insignia. His eyes are on me, and for a second, just a second, I see recognition. Real, precise, sharp. The way someone doesn't look at a stranger. I hold his gaze for only a moment, then he moves. And that's when the room changes. The pianist stops mid-chord. The press secretary puts down her clipboard. Someone in the front row mutters, "Is that?" I don't turn to look again, because I already know what's coming next. I keep my hands still. My mother is still fuming, unaware that she's not the one in control anymore. Lena shifts uncomfortably beside me. She hates scenes, even when she's not the center of them. I wonder if she's heard of General Laszlo Kirsch. Probably not. Most people in this room haven't, but I have. I know who he is not from press releases or military biographies, but from the silent halls of a compound that doesn't officially exist, from nights translating field briefings in a mountain tunnel beneath the Baltic Line, from the whisper-coded dispatches tagged Z1 that carried more weight than the medals pinned to every chest in this ballroom. I met him once, in silence, 4 years ago. He doesn't know my name is Sylvie Mercer, but he might know the code. Still, I don't move, don't nod, don't break protocol, because silence is still my weapon. My mother exhales sharply beside me, misreading the sudden stillness of the room as victory. She takes another sip of her wine. The liquid shakes in the glass. Across the marble floor, heels click. 2 uniformed officers walk swiftly toward the stage. One leans into the governor's ear. The governor stiffens, then steps aside, and the general takes the microphone. He doesn't look at my mother. He doesn't look at Lena. He looks at me. Then says calmly, voice steady, correction acknowledged. The error was in the briefing file, not the certificate, and for the record, this protocol, the one we're honoring today, was drafted under Black Channel clearance by a civilian operator embedded during Operation Shard. I know that because I signed the original. Pause, ma'am. Thank you for your service. Silence. Utter silence. My mother's hand slowly lowers. Lena's mouth opens, then closes. Someone from the Joint Security Committee actually stands up. All eyes turn to me. I don't bow. I don't cry. I don't say a single word. The general gives me one last nod, then steps back, and the pianist doesn't resume, because no one in the room knows what to do next. But I do. I exhale and walk forward. I didn't grow up in a military family. No one in my house saluted anyone. We were suburban normal. Our dinner table didn't hold strategy, just cold spaghetti and opinions that came out like facts. My mother was the kind of woman who believed in performance, not truth. As long as things looked polished, the cracks didn't matter. To her, I was the quiet one. Too quiet. The one who read manuals instead of magazines. Who spent summers inside learning phrases in Russian and Dari and Turkish for no reason she could understand. Lena was the bright one. The one with piano lessons, debate team, picture-perfect posture. I was always just there. Useful when needed, invisible when not. And I let it be that way, because I learned early some power doesn't need an audience. By the time I was 22, I was already gone. Not in the dramatic sense, no grand rebellion. Just gone. Accepted into a foreign services fellowship that wasn't exactly what the acceptance letter said it was. I never corrected my mother when she told people I was working in global communications. I don't think she ever really asked what that meant. She liked introducing me as the older one, the one who's always traveling somewhere in Europe, I think. She liked Lena's achievements better. They were easier to explain, easier to post about. But while Lena was finishing her master's in public administration, I was crossing borders on forged identities, switching phones every 6 days, and memorizing maps that didn't exist. I've been chased, cornered, trained in rooms where the windows are always blacked out and names are never used. I've pulled people out of burning cities. I've pulled the truth out of diplomats who didn't realize their secrets had already been compromised. And I've done it all in silence. That's the job. No parades, no plaques, no titles. You finish, you vanish. Back into civilian life like none of it happened. So I did. When I came home last year, my clearance wasn't just low, it was invisible, deliberately scrubbed, per orders. I started again at the bottom, working in a liaison office between Federal Energy Coordination and Diplomatic Services. On paper, I was a temp with a language background. In reality, I had shaped the very protocol they now referenced at these roundtables. But no one knew. No one was supposed to. I kept my head down, took the meeting notes, corrected translations before they embarrassed themselves, did the job, quietly, cleanly. Until my boss started to resent even that. His name's Dana Hall, mid-40s legacy hire full of buzzwords and overconfidence. He couldn't pronounce half the acronyms he quoted. But he had connections, and a loud voice. He once said to me, smiling, "Sylvie, you're like the plant in the corner. No trouble, no demands." I like that. I smiled back and translated the Turkish threat memo on his desk while he went to lunch. He thought I was decoration, something passive, background, like my mother always had. And when my mother finally convinced me to come to that award ceremony because Lena was being honored and it'll look strange if you don't show up, Sylvie, I knew exactly what role I was being cast in. The quiet one. The one who doesn't matter. She bought me a new blazer the day before. Said my posture needed work. Didn't ask once how my job was going. Lena, of course, beamed with nerves and excitement. She was being acknowledged for coordinating press between military installations and civil planning teams. An internship that lasted 3 months and mostly involved running spreadsheets. Still, it looked impressive on the surface. And that's all that mattered to our mother. Me, I was just Sylvie, the one who translates stuff. The one who keeps moving around. We don't really know what she does. When I pointed out the error on Lena's certificate that night, it was instinct. Not to embarrass her. Not to interrupt. But because words have weight. And when you've spent a decade in silence, you know when something is slightly off. A wrong term. A reversed title. Something that in a different room would have meant political collapse or a broken operation. But to my mother, it was just me interrupting her perfect picture. So she screamed. And for a second, just a second, I forgot which version of me I was supposed to be. The obedient daughter. Or the woman who'd once walked out of a closed room in Kosovo, carrying intelligence that shut down a weapons route. The girl who couldn't speak for herself, or the one who couldn't afford to speak at all. My whole life they saw silence as weakness. They never understood it was a shield. Now that I'm back, the silence is still necessary for a while. But something changed the moment the general stood up. He looked at me and didn't see a secretary. He saw the signature he once memorized under pressure. He saw the quiet operator whose name never made it into print. And that meant, maybe, just maybe, the silence was almost over. They never had to steal anything outright. All they had to do was keep looking the other way. That's how the slow erasure began. No ceremony, no firing, just a quiet tightening around me, one thread at a time. It started in the office. Emails stopped including my name. Then the ones I did receive were all passive-aggressive per my last message. Remind Sylvie not to assume authority. Sylvie, stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. A phrase built like a fence. I kept my head down. I answered every request with precision, even the ones deliberately misfiled to trap me. Even when my suggestions were used without credit. Even when I caught mistakes in language that could have derailed entire projects, and no one thanked me. They didn't want me gone. They wanted me small, manageable, decorative. The same way my mother used to seat me at the far end of the table during holiday dinners, close enough to smile far enough not to interrupt the story she was telling about her perfect girls. Lena got invited into internal meetings. She didn't work for our office, but somehow my mother had arranged for her to shadow a few teams. Just for exposure, she said. Lena sat beside my boss and nodded with practiced interest as he monologued through briefings. One morning, I was asked to prepare a quick dossier for a visiting liaison team bullet points background context contact protocols. I had prepared thousands of these before, under far more stressful conditions in war rooms that smelled like metal and sand. This time, I delivered it directly to Dana's desk. He looked at it, then at me. What is this, the summary you asked for? He flipped it open, eyes skimming fast, as if looking for a reason not to understand it. Then he tossed it onto his desk. I didn't need this much. You're overthinking again. This isn't war. I said nothing, but for a second I forgot how to breathe. Because there halfway down the page was a name I hadn't seen in 6 years, a man once involved in black market petroleum routes through Georgia. I had met him, smelled the sweat on his collar as he lied to my face. I included him not by accident, but because I knew that name wasn't supposed to be there. And now it was sitting ignored under a coffee-stained paperweight. Dana didn't recognize the name, didn't realize what he'd dismissed, didn't know that what I'd put in that report could have raised an internal alarm across 5 departments. He just wanted a one-pager, something presentable. And the worst part, I let it go. I picked up the file, took it back, shrunk it down to what he wanted, just like he wanted me. Because if I pushed back, he'd see me as difficult, and difficult people don't last long. They get sidelined, transferred, erased. A week later, Lena got invited to accompany a task force to Brussels, not because she earned it, but because she fit the tone. She posted about it with hashtags and a filtered photo of her smiling next to the NATO flag. The same flag I once had to pin inside my inner coat lining as a last resort identifier in case I was found in the wrong valley holding the wrong phone. No one saw that version of me. No one asked. The final blow came in a meeting room with no windows, 3 weeks before the award ceremony. I had just returned from a quiet weekend planning to brief Dana on a language variant that appeared in a new batch of internal documents, a term I hadn't seen since my second rotation in Moldova. But the moment I stepped into the office, the air was wrong. I wasn't on the list for the meeting. My badge didn't scan. My access had been downgraded. No explanation. No memo. When I asked, the assistant whispered, "Dana says your role has shifted. You'll just be helping on external notes for now." External notes, meaning meeting minutes, summaries, maybe printing name tags. I went to Dana's door, knocked once. He didn't invite me in, just said through the half-open frame, "It's just not working, Sylvie. You're not adaptable to this format. You don't mesh well. Mesh well." Like this was about personality, not performance. Like this wasn't about the fact that I noticed too much, knew too much, saw cracks in their systems that they didn't even realize were there. I stood there for 3 seconds, then left, because I knew if I stayed, I'd say something. And saying the wrong thing even once could undo everything I'd built, everything I'd protected. I went home that night and sat at my kitchen table for hours. Didn't eat, didn't move, just sat there staring at the silence, letting it press in like fog, and for the first time in years, I felt something crack. Not anger, not even sadness, just disbelief that, after all I had done, all I had carried, I had returned to a world that couldn't see me and didn't care to. It didn't matter that I could speak 6 languages, that I had once shut down a fuel corridor with one sentence spoken over a burner phone, that I had rescued an asset from a rooftop in Tirana with nothing but a stopwatch and a suitcase full of forged credentials. Here, I was just Sylvie, the woman who typed too much. There was a moment when I never said aloud where I looked at my reflection and thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I am just forgettable. Maybe all those years overseas, all those missions, all that discipline meant nothing if no one here even blinked. And worse, maybe it wasn't their fault. Maybe it was mine, for believing I could come back and still be seen. The Monday after my clearance was quietly reduced, I arrived at the office and found my desk had been moved. Not just to a different section, to a different floor. No explanation. Just a sticky note on a box B2 overflow workspace. B2 was a storage level, a makeshift cluster of cubicles near the emergency stairwell next to an air vent that never stopped whining. They didn't even assign me a phone line. I sat between a broken filing cabinet and a flickering overhead light, and for weeks, no one noticed I was gone. No emails, no "Where's Sylvie?" No calls, nothing. I faded out of the building the way a light dims underwater slowly without ripple. And I started to wonder, had I imagined it all? The field missions. The encrypted calls at 2:14 a.m. The flight into Tirana under false papers. The man in Budapest who whispered my code name without turning his head. None of it existed on paper. Even my medals had been classified as unattributed contributions. No proof, no history. Just memories I couldn't speak of written in a language no one around me understood. At night, I stopped sleeping. Not from adrenaline like in the old days, but from hollowness. I'd wake at 3:17 a.m. sweating, convinced I was being watched, only to remember no one was watching me anymore. I wasn't a target. I wasn't an asset. I was nothing. I walked through grocery stores and coffee shops like a ghost, observing people laugh, argue, kiss, complain about weather, and wondered how I ever belonged to them. How I ever thought I could slide back into civilian life, tuck myself neatly into an office chair, and pretend I hadn't once watched a man die from cyanide in a basement with no name. The distance between who I had been and who I was, now allowed to be, was too wide to cross. And every day, that silence grew heavier. Even my own mother didn't ask how I was doing. When we spoke, usually brief calls full of updates about Lena's life, she asked questions like, "You're still doing that admin thing, right? They haven't promoted you yet. You just need to put yourself out there more." Put myself out there. As if I hadn't once stood in front of a regional commander and recited nuclear terms from memory under the threat of a sidearm. As if I hadn't spent years hidden in plain sight, protecting people who'd never know my name. Now I was the one who fetched coffee during meetings, the one who edited other people's talking points, the one who disappeared between hallways and elevator doors. And the terrifying thing was, I started to accept it. Not because I believed it was right, but because I didn't have the strength left to argue. The night before Lena's award ceremony, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my small apartment holding the blazer my mother insisted I wear. It still had the tag on it. Blue, tailored. A little too bright for my taste. She'd said, "At least try to look professional for once." I stared at myself, not the blazer, not the hair, not the posture, me. And I didn't see a spy, didn't see an operative, didn't even see someone strong. I saw a woman whose life had been erased so effectively even she had started to forget who she was. I felt something tighten in my throat, a knot that wouldn't release, and I almost didn't go to the ceremony. I almost texted Lena and said I was sick, or stuck at work, or too tired, and maybe she would have believed me. Because in her mind, I was the older sister who'd always been a little disconnected, a little strange, hard to explain. But I didn't text her, because something in me, something fragile but still intact, whispered, "Show up." Not for them, not for their applause, not even for myself, but for the girl who once held a forged passport and whispered code into a satellite phone in a war-torn alley and kept walking even when her feet bled. For her. She deserved to be seen. Even if no one in that room recognized her, even if all they saw was Sylvie, the quiet one. I ironed the blazer, brushed my hair, and told myself, just show up, let them look, let them underestimate. They can take your badge, your title, your desk, but they cannot take the part of you that remembers exactly what you survived. It started with a drawer, one I hadn't opened in months, back corner of my apartment, beneath old folders and paperbacks that no longer fit my life, inside a phone, not my current one, not registered, unmarked, off-grid, and a notebook narrow dark green almost blank, but inside were names, codes, fragments of memory I had forced myself to forget piece by piece because remembering too much had a cost. But now it was time to remember. The day after I sat alone in B2 breathing air that tasted like static, I woke up different. Not louder, not angrier, just awake. I made coffee, the cheap kind, black bitter, the kind I'd gotten used to sipping during overnight stakeouts. Then I opened my laptop and typed 3 lines into a private note Operation Shard Protocol authorship check archived NATO signatory Qadir Liaison ID. Was used in January dispatch. Confirm pattern. Canaries still active. Just typing those 3 things snapped something back into place. Because these weren't ordinary files. They weren't things you could Google. They were pieces of my real life. The life that hadn't disappeared, only been hidden. And now I had questions. And I knew where to start. The building I worked in was connected to 4 federal networks. 3 of them public, one buried. I still had partial read access legacy trace permissions they forgot to revoke when they pushed me out of the inner loop. They thought I was harmless. That was their mistake. They assumed a silent woman in a side room posed no threat. But I still remembered my clearances, my habits, the trails that mattered. I didn't hack anything, didn't break any rules. I just looked, carefully, patiently, and it didn't take long, because the name I saw in that dossier, the one Dana dismissed, had resurfaced in 2 cables, low priority, misfiled under cultural coordination. But I knew better, because the phrasing matched a template I helped design, a shadow format used to track hostile cross-border messaging disguised as civil diplomacy, and Dana had let it slide because he didn't know what he was looking at. Because he thought civil-military coordination meant media prep and coffee briefings, because he thought I was a plant in the corner. He never once asked why a temp liaison like me could read 3 languages fluently and anticipate strategy before the actual analysts. He never asked how I knew what I knew, and I never told him, because I was never there for him. The day I requested to shadow Lena's award ceremony was the first time I initiated anything in weeks. I asked quietly, filed the right form, used the right tone. Dana said yes without thinking. After all, I wasn't on any special detail, just a floater, a quiet one. Wear something sharp, he added. As a favor to your sister, you'll just be background anyway. I nodded and packed 2 things that night, the name tag they issued me, a folded copy of the original NATO protocol, the one no one knew I wrote, just in case. The day of the ceremony I arrived early, watched the staging team rehearse handoffs and camera angles, saw my mother rush around powdering Lena's face like she was prepping her for Broadway. No one noticed me, and that was perfect, because I wasn't there to be seen. Not yet, but the moment I walked past the security checkpoint, I saw him. General Laszlo Kirsch, NATO Security Oversight Division, full uniform, quietly sitting 4th row left side. I hadn't seen him in 4 years, but the moment our eyes met briefly discreetly, I knew he remembered. His glance didn't linger, but it didn't need to, because once in a classified room beneath a NATO airbase in Poland, I had handed him a report that changed the way he briefed 6 countries, and I never signed my name, but he knew the code I used. At the reception, I stayed still, spoke only when spoken to, listened, watched. And when the certificate was handed to Lena and I saw the same error that had almost leaked into a major treaty summary, I reacted without thinking. A quiet correction. Just one word. But that was enough. For my mother to humiliate me, for the room to turn, and for the general to rise. I hadn't planned it. I hadn't expected him to speak. But sometimes you don't need a plan. You just need to show up with your truth intact. Let the facts speak. Let the silence deliver what words cannot. That morning I was nothing, invisible. That night I was someone they didn't have a name for. And that's exactly how it should have been. Because power isn't what they think it is. It's not in who talks the loudest. It's not in the promotions or the plaques. It's in restraint, in memory, in knowing exactly who you are and who they are even when they don't. We were all standing in a hall meant for celebration. Gold trim along the walls, tassels and flags, a podium flanked by 2 oversized state seals. I stood near the back, pressed into the wallpaper like a misplaced assistant, holding my breath, holding my silence. My mother stood at the front row with Lena smiling, guiding her shoulders into posture every few minutes like she was molding a statue. I kept my name tag tucked into my pocket. Nobody needed to know I was part of anything. Not yet. The MC's voice was warm and booming, introducing dignitaries, listing accomplishments, cueing applause like it was theater. Lena's name came up third. She has been an essential part of streamlining the civilian-military messaging effort, he said. The language was vague, carefully sanitized. I recognized phrases I'd once written before they were watered down and posted into glossy briefs. My sister smiled perfectly. My mother beamed beside her. The certificate was crisp, printed, framed. But as soon as it was handed over, I spotted the same phrase I had flagged before, a misused diplomatic term. It sounded harmless, but in protocol context, it distorted the entire function of her position. Like saying safety officer when the role is actually observation only. It creates confusion. In war rooms, confusion kills. So I stepped forward. Just a foot. I leaned toward my mother, voice low. That's the wrong term. They used the Kosovo clause. It should have been Istanbul Format B. I didn't say it loudly. Didn't interrupt. Just pointed it out the way you'd fix a loose thread on someone's collar. But she snapped around. Her voice broke through the entire hall. Shut your mouth. It cracked like a whip. People turned, chairs rustled. Even the photographer paused mid-shot. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just stood there, hands at my side, staring past her toward the 4th row, left side, where the Major General was already rising to his feet. General Laszlo Kirsch didn't shout. He didn't wave his arms or ask for a mic. He simply stepped forward. His medals caught the light, and with absolute calm, he said, "Actually, she's correct." The room stilled. The MC blinked. The state representative froze mid-turn. Kirsch walked slowly toward the stage, glancing at the certificate. He didn't ask permission. He simply took it from Lena's hands, read it, paused, then looked up, not at the audience, at me. His words were precise. The Istanbul Format B was last amended under confidential NATO revisions. This error compromises operational clarity. And this correction was made by the woman who wrote that protocol. Gasps weren't loud. They were sharp. Like everyone had inhaled at once and forgotten how to exhale. I stayed silent. I didn't nod, didn't smile. I just looked at him, and he gave a single gesture, not a salute. But something quieter, a hand placed flat over his chest, then dropped with respect. Recognition. It said everything. He turned to the stage crew. Please prepare a corrected certificate and ensure Ms. Mercer receives full briefing credit. There it was, my name, said in a room where I was never supposed to exist. My mother didn't move. Lena stared at me like I'd morphed into someone she had never met. The audience didn't know how to react. Applaud, stay silent. Nobody had a cue card for this. I stood still, didn't step forward, didn't say a word. I let the room rearrange itself around the truth. I watched Dana, my boss, 2 rows behind, trying to shrink into his seat. He knew. He remembered. I had once written the internal memo that helped dismantle a smuggling corridor he'd misreported as routine infrastructure. And now, it was clear. Not just to him, to everyone. After the ceremony, no one approached me. Not at first. My mother walked past like I wasn't there. Lena was crying, but not the kind of crying I could fix. I didn't chase after them. I didn't explain. That part of my life explaining myself was over. I left through a side exit, into a wind that smelled like summer asphalt and blooming jasmine. For the first time in months, I felt air move through me, not around me, because something had shifted. Not in them, in me. The silence had spoken, and it had been enough. 3 days later, my badge access was restored. Not that I asked for it. No one told me why. No one mentioned the ceremony. But the tone of the emails changed. Would you mind reviewing this? Could we get your eyes on the NATO brief looping you in? Sylvie, we trust your instincts. Funny how fast silence turns into respect once someone important breaks it first. But by then, I had already made my decision. I didn't return to the B2 floor. I packed my drawer into a canvas bag, left my badge in a white envelope, typed a single message to HR, thank you for the opportunity. That was all. No announcement, no speech, just a quiet exit like all my other exits before. Only this time it wasn't under orders. It was mine. My mother called that night. I let it ring 4 times. Then answered. Her voice was brittle like it was balancing on a wire. You embarrassed her, she said. At her own ceremony. You couldn't just let her have her moment. I didn't argue. Didn't try to defend myself. There was no point. I just said she had her moment. What I said didn't take anything from her. It corrected something that could have cost her in the field. That correction wasn't about ego. It was about safety. Silence. Then she said, you're always so dramatic, always trying to prove something. And that was when I knew truly, finally, she'd never see me. Not the real me, because she didn't want to. Some people can't handle the truth of who you are, especially when they spent their whole life pretending you were less. They need you small, so they don't have to feel smaller in comparison. It's not hatred. It's fear. And I no longer carry that fear. Not hers, not theirs, not even mine. A week later, I flew out. No press, no entourage. Just me and a single backpack. Destination undisclosed. But when I landed, a black SUV was already waiting. The driver didn't ask my name, just nodded once. Welcome back, ma'am. I don't live under aliases anymore, but I also don't wear name tags. The work I do now is quieter, not field work, not diplomacy, something between. I design systems, audit intel flows, train the ones who come after. No glory, no podiums, but real impact, which is more than I ever had behind that desk on B2. Sometimes I see photos online my mother and Lena at some event holding drinks. Once Dana showed up in a trade newsletter quoted about cross-agency communication. They're all still playing their parts, and I wish them no harm. But I also feel nothing. No bitterness, no ache. Just a calm recognition that they no longer define any part of me. The only place I go where people still whisper is NATO Command South. Sometimes when I enter a room, junior officers stand straighter. Not because of my title, which they don't always know, but because of how the generals respond when I speak. I don't raise my voice. I don't flash credentials. But they listen, because the right people always recognize real weight. A young analyst asked me recently, do you ever wish they'd said sorry, your old boss, your family? I looked at her and smiled gently. No, I don't need an apology. I need a distance. Because when you spend years fighting to be seen, you forget that disappearing on your own terms is sometimes the most powerful act of all. They thought they left me behind, but I was never behind them. I was simply ahead and out of sight. And when they wouldn't give me a seat at their table, I built my own command.